And I'm not a fan of the collectivists. I think they're making a dreadful error.
Okay, okay, let me give you some more figures. And I want to stay with this issue of single-parent families. You know, they're around in Britain, forgive me, I don't know the Canadian figures, there are around 2 million people subject to domestic abuse. 70% of those are women. 35% of all violent crime is domestic abuse. There may well be reasons other than the social warriors and the neo-post-structuralist
biggest
Marxists.
reason is alcohol, actually.
Well, but then these are issues that need to be addressed at a level not in terms of the social warriors, but in terms, why are men beating up women?
Mostly because they're drunk. It's the biggest single contributor to domestic violence.
But why when women get drunk, do they not beat
They
up
do.
their husbands?
They just don't use lethal force.
No,
In fact,
forget
women are more likely to hit their husbands than the reverse. The literature on domestic violence is crystal clear.
No, not in Britain it isn't.
Yes, it
because
is.
Forgive me, I've just read it. It's
well, what did you read? Because I know the epidemiological studies.
I've just read the government research on this.
On what, though?
On domestic violence, and 70% of domestic violence, domestic abuse, is male on female.
Yes, but
not lethal, which is a different matter. Lethal is killing somebody.
Yes. If you look at the number of times that a person in a relationship hits the other person, women do it more than men. The problem is men are much stronger and they're much more likely to use harmful force. That's part of what accounts for the abuse, and very much of that is fueled by alcohol. And so if we were really serious about reducing domestic abuse and reducing campus rape, for example, we'd be very concerned about the effect of alcohol. But we're not.
But so you do, not you, one does have to address larger social issues.
Well, as I said,
advertising, of promotion, of cheap liquor, of, to use a word that you're not fond of capital.
I'm not so sure about the latter one, but the former ones for sure. I mean, like I said, I studied alcoholism and drug abuse for decades. I have many publications on them aimed at ameliorating the consequences, particularly of alcohol use, because of all the drugs that people abuse, alcohol has the most pernicious social effects. By far, 50% of the people who are involved in a violent altercation are either drunk as victims or as perpetrators. And it's the only drug that we know of that actually makes people more aggressive. So it's a terrible problem. But people decry the rates of domestic abuse and that sort of thing, but they're very bad at figuring out what to do about it. But the same thing happens on campuses with regards to campus rape.
But forgive me, but it is the case that people are figuring out what to do. That's why one of the reasons feminism was so important. It did found refuges. It did identify an issue that largely wasn't on the agenda. It has shaped laws. In those circumstances, you have to stand up for feminism, don't you?
I would be very careful about attributing those transformations to feminism.
No, I didn't.
Per se.
I didn't say they were to be attributed. It's not causal, but I did say they helped to identify them. They helped to ameliorate them through refuges, and they've helped. I didn't say they were causal. They have helped to get laws changed which protect women.
Well, I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater and claim that women who've acted on behalf of women in the social sphere have always been wrong. I mean, I'd have to include the suffragettes in that analysis. But I would certainly say that at the moment, the doctrine that we know of as feminism is doing far more harm than good.
But there are feminisms. There's no feminism. There are feminisms. So what you're actually attacking is just one form of many forms of feminism that are available in North America, never mind globally.
Well, they're sufficiently unattractive so that a pronounced minority of women in the UK identify as feminist. The feminism that I see as most rampant at the moment, let's say, has its roots in this postmodern neo-Marxist view that I'm not a fan of. And I think it does far more harm than good to women as well as men by insisting, among other things, that the only reason that there isn't equality of outcome for women is because of patriarchal oppression.
I want to comment, as we're drawing towards the close, as people like me say, to talk about what has brought you to this degree of prominence. I don't mean because you're on this programme, but I mean more generally. And I think it's partly because you've identified a constituency who feels neglected. And in fact, you've got an odd...
it's me, man, standing up for the oppressed.
No. That I don't believe, because that's when you sound like a bad 60s guy. But I do think, and Slavoj Žižek, a postmodernist Marxist, has spoken well of you.
And badly.
And badly, but also well. And he, in a sense, it's because what he's saying, you're addressing something that isn't addressed, which is, as it were, a crisis in masculinity. And that seems to me, you accept that large numbers of your readers are male, not exclusively, but large readers. What led you to be worried about manliness?
Well, it's more my viewers than my readers. And part of that is because 80% of people who watch YouTube happen to be men. So it's hard to segregate that general statistic from the specific statistics of my channel. Well, it isn't really that I'm concerned with men. I'm concerned with what's symbolically masculine. And that actually is different. I think that because we have this proclivity to view our current social structure through the lens of patriarchal tyranny, that we confuse attempts by people to take their proper place in that hierarchy as a consequence of the manifestation of their competence with the manifestation of power and tyranny, and that's tremendously demoralizing, especially to young men. Now, it doesn't seem to affect young women as much, and I think the reason for that... Why doesn't it?
No, why is it debilitating to men?
Well, because if you tell men who are trying to do their best in the world that all they're doing is manifesting the kind of behavior that led to a tyrannical patriarchy, you're not exactly encouraging them to do their best in the world.
Have we got any evidence that large swathes of men across America, Canada, or here for that matter, are themselves subject to those kinds of disquisitions?
Well, we have the evidence that they increasingly underperform women at every level of educational attainment. So that's not trivial.
No, but we can't draw from that a conclusion that the real reason they're not performing as well as they were performing is for this reason, because the reasons are always multifactorial, to use your language. So it isn't, there's no cause and effect between...
Well, there's a hypothetical cause and effect, but it's not proven, to your point.
And if it's not proven, forgive me for using an English phrase, why bang on about it so much?
Because it actually matters to me that there's hordes of men and women as well, but we're talking about men who aren't doing well in the world. I'm a clinical psychologist. I mean, my goal is to help as many individuals as possible set their lives in order and live meaningful and productive lives so that they can tolerate the fact that life is suffering without becoming bitter and cruel. And so I think that the humble approach, generally speaking, towards the transformation of the world is to take stock of yourself and set your own iniquities right first. That's all. That doesn't mean you shouldn't act in the world. And sometimes you have to act in the world despite your imperfections, as you pointed out, often. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't be your primary concern. I think they should be your primary concern.
You do sound like an evangelical Protestant.
Well, you know, we're all stuck with what we are, I suppose, to some degree.
Jordan Peterson, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
That's...